Hello and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran, forcing your nephew to create a Reverb account for you to sell old gear for hard cash, or else a scrappy upstart, freshly arrived in East Nashville with nothing but a tube of chapstick and a dance belt, this is your show, either way, because ultimately, it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, thanks for being here this month. If you're a regular listener to this show, you probably noticed that we're publishing this episode a few days early. Usually we air the last Friday of every month, but today we have a big announcement and I wanted to run the show concurrently with it. This has been in the works for a few months now, but we just confirmed it. At the end of July, we're going to be taking the podcast on the road and doing a live version of it at the Newport Folk Festival. This is a festival which gave me one of the first national platforms I ever got as a songwriter back in 2009. I had just released my first album, Nation of Heat. They welcomed me to their stage and they broadcast the whole set on NPR. And just how much that helped me get a foot in the door initially cannot be overstated. And in the intervening years, they've had me back a few times and really just supported. I've watched them support a slew of my musical friends too. And Newport has always made it a point to encourage a spirit of collaboration and a spirit of experimentation. And I think it's in that spirit that they've invited me to bring the podcast to one of their stages. It's my understanding that they've never booked a show like this before, so I'm really grateful that they're taking the plunge with me. And if you're a new listener of the show that the festival has pointed in my direction today with their announcement, welcome. Thanks for being here today. I encourage you to head back into our archive to find shows that include Joe Ely, Hayes Carl, Sarah Watkins, and many others. And if you have tickets to be at the Fort this summer, I'll see you there. Okay, as far as other news goes this month, some of our former guests have been very busy. Bruce Robison has released a new album called Bruce Robison and the Back Porch Band. Slade Cleaves released a new single this week called Drunken Barber's Hand. And Strand of Oaks appeared on Last Call with Carson Daly and CBS This Morning. So that's wonderful. I love keeping up with everyone who's been on the show thus far. Congratulations, guys, all of you. If you'd like to hear some of my songs live in the coming months, here's where I'll be. Thursday, May 25th in Cambridge, Massachusetts at the Sinclair. Unfortunately, up against Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals with the Celtics. I don't know why they had to do that to me, but they did. You guys come out anyway. You'll be able to catch the second half. Friday, May 26th in Earlville, New York at the Earlville Opera House. The 27th at the Parlor Room in Northampton, Massachusetts. June 9th at the Chapel in San Francisco. June 10th in Sonoma, California for the Huichica Music Festival. Then starting in July, around July 6th, I'll be back in Australia again for a tour that will be supported by the wonderful Courtney Marie Andrews. I'll be in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and a few dates in New Zealand as well. Check my website for those exact dates because there's a lot of words in there that I would butcher the pronunciation of right now, and I don't need to subject you guys to that. Finally, I'll be supporting Mandolin Orange in Raleigh, North Carolina on Saturday, July 22nd. That will be one for the books, so if you're local, please don't miss that. And if you live in Montana, Idaho, or Utah, keep your eyes peeled. I'll be finalizing a short tour there for August soon. And if you live in the UK and Europe, Also keep your eyes peeled. I'll be announcing some dates on your side of the ocean soon, set for October or thereabouts. Okay, finally, if you enjoy this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, there are a few quick, painless things that you can do to help out. First, you can leave a rating for the show in the iTunes store. You just open up the podcast app, click the search button, type in the working songwriter, click on the reviews button, and write one of your own. The second thing that you could do, also from your phone, is share a link to the episode with like-minded friends. Just click on that icon with the square and the arrow coming out of the top and send it to them. Or, better yet, go old school. Just tell a friend about it. That would help me immensely, and the simple math on any of those things is they will help me and the show out a lot more than they will be a pain in the ass for you. So thank you for doing those things. The show's been growing every month, and the only reason is because you guys are mentioning it to friends. So thank you. Okay, I think that's all the harassment I have for you this month. So this month's episode was really fun to record. Robert was a piece of cake to interview, as you'll hear. And I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed recording it. My guest this month is Robert Ellis. Born in 1988, he grew up in Lake Jackson, Texas, just south of Houston. That's a town known for basically two things: the Dow Chemical Company and former Congressman Ron Paul. After dropping out of high school, he began playing in various bands and ensembles around the Houston area, playing everything from jazz to punk to country. His self-released first album, The Great Rearranger, caught the ear of George Fontaine Sr., one of the owners of New West Records. Robert's first release with New West, Photographs, was named one of the 50 best albums of 2011 by American Songwriter magazine. The album ushered him on to the national stage, where he's been ever since. From there, he and his band would cut their teeth as a touring operation, supporting the Drive-By Truckers, Old Crow Medicine Show, Deer Tick, the Old 97s, and many others. For his ensuing album, Robert wanted to expand his sound beyond the limits of the George Jones and Chris Christopherson model that his initial efforts had cast him in. So he tapped renowned producer Jacquire King, whose past clients included Tom Waits, Modest Mouse, and Norah Jones, and their work together resulted in 2014's Lights from the Chemical Plant, a stylistically adventurous record that was received to great critical acclaim. He's appeared at Bonnaroo, Stagecoach, and the Austin City Limits Festival. He's appeared on NPR's Mountain Stage and also appeared as a guest on E-Town alongside Rodney Crowell. The New York Times described the Chemical Plant record as a gut punch of a third record of downcast roots music. American Songwriter has deemed him a singer at the very forefront of Americana's vanguard. An Uncut magazine has called his most recent work a vivid and unexpected transformation. Robert just moved to Austin, Texas, where I make my home, and he stopped by my place on a recent Monday or Tuesday morning to talk shop.
Yeah, I don't believe any of that stuff. I think that people with good taste can make an iPhone sound good, and people with bad taste can make $1 million preamp sound awful.
That's it.
They just don't know what they're doing.
That's it. I wish I'd understood that a little bit earlier in my life. Dude, take me back to Lake Jackson, Texas.
Are we already in the podcast?
We're starting it right now.
Okay.
We're starting it right now. Take me back there. You're growing up. How did you come to music as a kid?
It's in my family. My mom's a piano player and teacher, and she was always playing and kind of got me into piano at a really early age. And then my uncle was a really great bluegrass guitar player, and as a family, we all went to this bluegrass festival outside of Belleville, Texas, once a year, and I was kind of just always around music. And
Right, but usually when a parent plays piano and pushes it on a kid, the kid becomes resentful for it, but you kind of dug it, huh?
Well, she didn't really push it on me. My room was next door to the room in the house where she taught piano.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when I was probably 3 years old, I was just like, because I liked the sound of it, I was like, I want to play piano, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think she was pretty careful to she never forced me to practice. She wasn't like really disciplinary, you know, to a 3-year-old. She just kind of showed me how to play. And you know, I didn't really take to the piano. I sort of discovered guitar in like 3rd grade, and then that's what really got me into music, you know. I think when I was younger, I thought, oh, piano isn't very cool, like this is something my mom does, you know. And now I'm like very regretful that I didn't just stick with piano.
I think you're doing just fine with the
Guitar
piano
is
playing.
just such a dumb instrument.
So were you mainly interested then in the kind of bluegrass style that your uncle had at that point? Is that where you took your first step in with guitar?
Yeah, I mean, that's what got me really into it, was sitting and playing with him and learning fiddle tunes, and then learning how to Travis pick at a really young age.
What's Travis pick?
Travis picking is a style that's credited to Merle Travis. It just means that you're doing bass lines with your thumb and melodies with your fingers at the same time, and it's syncopated, so the melody is accenting the upbeats.
Would Chet Atkins later fall in that style?
Yeah,
Okay.
Chet Atkins, Doc Watson, like those are guys that I heard Doc Watson's like Deep River Blues, and I was like, that sounds like 3 guitars. How do you do that? You know? And that's all Travis pick stuff. It's just figuring out how to play the bass line and then add the melody. And my uncle just like, he was very funny. He played that stuff, and I was like, how do you do that? And rather than teaching me how to do it, because it's actually really complicated for a little kid to learn, he was just like, well, the bass line, your thumb just becomes a machine. You just play it so much you don't think about it. So I played just the thumb with him, you know, while he would play the song. And
he would play the melody.
Yeah.
And you'd play the...
And I think it just got in my ear, and eventually I figured it out on my own, but it was never properly explained to me. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a weird coordination thing that you just, I think that if you get it in your ear and you know kind of what's happening, then eventually it falls into place.
There is, and I can't play guitar to that level, but there is an aha moment whether you're trying to separate your thumb playing the bass and your fingers on guitar, or your left hand and right hand on piano. There is a moment, it's like before the moment, you hear it as one big sound and you're like, that sounds like 5 instruments.
Yep.
And then after that moment, and God knows when it is, but you just start hearing them as separate things.
Yeah.
And that's it's like learning a different language and finally hearing a conversation and understanding it.
It's crazy. I explain it to my students sometimes. Travis picking is one of the few things, or I should say Travis picking and coordination-based playing. It's one of the few things where there's just a moment, like an aha moment, where you go from knowing absolutely nothing to knowing everything.
Yeah.
And it's so rewarding because everything else we do is so incremental. It's like you learn a little bit and then you build, and after years you're like, well, I'm a little better at this.
Right.
But with things like Travis picking, or with like, you know, playing certain rhythms on the drums, you just like, it clicks, and then you're like, I already should have known this. How did I not already know this?
Yes.
Like, it's mind-blowing.
And then you can't unlearn it. It's like it takes not years, it takes a long time to learn how to ride a bike. But once you can ride a bike, you can't then not know how to ride a bike.
I would like to test that theory. I'd love to see somebody who learned to ride a bike as a kid and then is 70 years old and hasn't ridden since they were a kid.
Or who is 33 years old. I think I'd be an excellent candidate for this.
Do you know how to ride a bike?
Oh, I used to know how to ride a bike, but I probably haven't ridden a bike in, in 10 years.
I know you don't know how to ride a motorcycle.
Oh, well, yeah, well, we're going to jump into that later. We'll jump into my motorcycle riding skills a little bit later. So that's how you started as a kid. What were you listening to then as a teenager when music started to become cool to you and you started to get your own voice with it?
I listened to, all of the bluegrass and country stuff that I said, was in my family. But, at a certain point, I just became, interested in the guitar as an instrument. And that led me to rock and roll. I got really into Led Zeppelin. And then as I got a little older and I became a little more cool high school kid, I was into indie rock and really guitar-centric bands. Like American Football.
Oh,
I don't know if you ever listened to them,
Yes.
but all that polyvinyl stuff was just really cool. He was finger tapping, indie rock music, but at the core of it was still a song. I don't know. So I got super into that, and it was funny. My education was sort of backwards from most people. I think or at least most people now in this scene in Austin where we're at. It's I know so many people that grew up on punk rock and rock music, and then they came to discover classic country and bluegrass. And I was sort of the opposite, which maybe explains my sensibilities now, is I didn't hear The Clash until I was 17 years old.
Right.
Or Black Flag. I had to be exposed to that stuff.
Yeah.
After already having this background. And because of that, I was this is the coolest thing.
Yep.
And still, in my perfect world, I would rather sound like The Clash than George Jones.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's
Yes, agreed.
the stuff that we sort of idealize, I think, is always, the opposite of what we knew as a really young kid in some ways. It's the fresh, punk thing.
It is.
That we want to be.
Yep. It really is. I mean, I didn't hear Sum 41 till I was 19. So it made all the difference.
I'd like to know what the equation is that got him to that sum of 41.
We'll also reveal that at the end of the show. Were you an interested pupil in school, or was it always just music for you?
I was pretty good in school. I had really good grades, especially near the end. At a certain point, it became clear to me that I was going to play music, and I dropped out of high school.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was 16, right at the legal age, whenever that was, 16 or 17. I think I had just become a junior, and I knew I was going to drop out. I knew that when the next semester came around, I would be legally allowed to, and I wouldn't need anyone's permission. So, right that whole year up until the point that I was going to drop out, I kind of made a point to have very good grades.
To prove a point?
Yeah, just to be a little jerk.
Yeah.
And I was always in, honors classes and stuff, but...
How did that fly with your folks, you dropping out?
Well, I told them at the beginning of that year, I said, when I hit 17, I'm out of here. I'm done. and I think they didn't believe me.
Yeah.
And then, seeing just I'm doing fantastic in school, and then sure enough, when it came around, I was pulled the plug.
Yeah.
And I think they were astounded more than anything. And there was a lot of sort of doubt in the community about that. I had guidance counselors and teachers who were really, you shouldn't do this, and my parents were not super supportive, but I don't know, pretty quickly I got my GED and I started going to community college that same semester and playing in the jazz band there. I don't know. I think...
Well, the thing is, those counselors and people, 99 out of 100 times they're right with that advice.
They are,
for most people. But if you really know... So was your idea, let me just get out of high school because I know I can get this GED really quick and I can just move on to then study music in college? Or you were just going to go on the road and play music?
I mean, right around that time, I got... I had always played in my own bands and done little tours, with my own bands. But I got called just randomly to go on tour with this punk band, and I did a couple real tours with this punk band. And
what was the name of that band?
It was this guy Roger Murray. He was the singer for a band called Agnostic Front.
Okay.
And I just randomly got asked to play bass in his solo project through someone who went to the gym that I worked at. I worked at the front desk at this gym. Okay. And it's very funny. But
so you end up on tour with him playing bass?
Yeah, I did a couple tours playing bass, and then I think I got a taste for it. And I don't know, between my own stuff and that, I was kind of just like, high school is not what I need to be doing right now. And for that matter, college or anything that's keeping me in one place is probably going to be counterproductive to what needs to happen. You know,
Yeah.
if I have to leave all the time and I have to focus on practicing, then this regimented sort of schooling it's kind of counterproductive.
Yeah. I had the same thing in college. It was just a moment. I was a junior, and I just thought to myself, I know what I'm going to do. I know where I need to be right now. I just need to get there.
Yeah.
Right now. Life is short, and I just need... Why would you not get to the place if you knew that is where you needed to be? You've described to me before one of your favorite residencies that you did in Houston. You would sit in on some sort of jazz residency, and you liked it because the players were so brutally honest that they'd turn to you sometimes and just be like, stop playing right now. Was that residency, was that around that age, or was that later? Or?
Yeah, when I moved to Houston shortly after dropping out. That was, me and Joffrey were talking about that. And I think
Joffrey, your bass player.
Yeah, we brought that up, I think, to say that how important that was to be told you suck. You know, and when I moved to Houston, I started just sitting in with different, jazz groups and R&B groups and people that were way above my ability. People that were really, really good. And I remember playing like at Bennigan's in the Galleria with this guy. I'm not even kidding. And with these guys who were incredible.
Yeah.
And I don't know what kind of tune we were playing, but at some point he just looks at me, the keyboard player, and he just goes, "Don't play." Just mouths the word "don't play," and I was crushed. But really, like, right after that, I went home and was like, okay, what am I doing wrong? What am I not doing in this style?
That's a great. I think one of the big ways to find success in life is when you hit a moment like that. You don't just go home and say, "Fuck that guy."
Yeah.
You go home and say, "Why am I getting this feedback from the world? What am I doing to get this feedback from the world?"
That's a good way to just live your life.
Yes, I agree.
Be responsible, And
I mean, sometimes people are being abusive towards you or assholes, and those are their own situations. But I'd say 90% of the time, if the world is consistently treating you in a way, it's probably need to look in your own backyard at that point.
Yeah. I mean, you... arguably are in a successful relationship.
It's not arguable at all. Of course I am.
But I think that's a really crucial thing to understand and learn if you're going to be in any kind of romantic relationship, specifically. But like every argument it's 50% both parties' fault, no matter what. Yeah. And as soon as you start thinking about things like that and you start accepting responsibility, you can move past things. I mean, even if you think, if I think my girlfriend is like being completely crazy, if I just approach it like, well, wait a minute, I'm doing something too also. Yeah. I'm creating a situation where this is okay at minimum. I'm 50% of the dynamic. Yeah. And it's just, I don't know, it's a lot healthier way to live your life. And not to even mention, like, you can only control what you're doing anyway. So, you can't control what other people are doing. Yeah.
Too. Yeah. So from what I can tell, you started really making a name for your own music in Houston and locally there when you started a residency at Fitzgerald's.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, we were doing country tunes. We were doing... just a bunch of classic country honky-tonk stuff, and it was kind of just happened randomly. A friend of mine owned a bar called Mangoes. He had just opened it.
I played Mangoes, man.
You remember that place?
Yes.
It was weird. Very weird.
Very weird. Very low ceilings.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, he opened this place. It used to be a Mexican restaurant, and he moved in and was like, this location's great. I want to have a music venue. His name is Omar, a really good friend, and he... It's
on that really busy street in Houston.
It was on Westheimer.
Okay.
Yep. Right near Montrose. Mm-hmm. And so he had this bar. It had just opened, and they had a night free. They were doing shows there on the weekends, like ticketed shows. And they had like Wednesday night free, and there was nobody in there. And Omar was just like, hey, we don't have anybody. Do y'all want to come up and maybe just play some tunes? So I called Will Van Horn and I think I called Joffrey, or Kelly, and we just went up there and played. There was like 2 people there. And that night, I was like, this is so much fun. We were just playing country and bluegrass tunes. Like, let's make it a weekly and, whatever. We weren't getting paid anything, but we were drinking for free, and that was rad.
That's payment, man. Yeah.
And so we decided to make it a weekly gig that night. And, man, it was insane. It was like within a matter of months, there were too many people coming every week.
It's awesome.
It was bizarre. And it wasn't country fans. It was like young people and old people and dancers and, people coming to do drugs and get wasted. And it was just like a crazy combination of like what you want to see at a show.
Yeah.
And we were adding, we were pretty obsessed at this point. We were adding like 10 new songs a week, 10 tunes that I didn't know before. Yeah. And every week I was like going through someone's catalog. Like we did a night where we did a bunch of Ray Price tunes, and then the next week we'd do a bunch more George Jones tunes, and then we'd do Haggard tunes, and then Wynn Stewart, and every week we just kept adding these tunes until eventually we had thousands of songs that we just knew.
That's awesome.
And we were playing 3 sets. We'd play for about 4 hours. We'd go from 10 to 2. And like I said, it got so out of hand that Mango's, they had to like move the stage. We played on one side of the room. They put a stage on the other. They ended up like building bigger bathrooms. They sectioned off the parking lot, and like, because people were just like, there's too many people. Yeah. And it was the right combination of stuff. It was a free event. I think that helped. It was called Whiskey Wednesdays. It was really fun music where everyone could dance and drink. But we also played a lot of ballads. I don't know. It was a really special thing. And for me as a songwriter, it was a real big education in like, just some of the greatest songs of all time, like going through Willie's catalog and learning all the Willie Nelson songs that I could. You start to see similarities in construction and themes and just things that you're like, oh, that turn of phrase, that's a very Willie turn of phrase. And you start to notice like, well, Willie played bass in Ray Price's band, and you see like, this little vocal thing reminds me of Ray Price in this Willie song. And like, I don't know, you start to notice this thread in songwriting and performing that goes all the way from the beginning of country music through present day, and like sort of connects everybody,
You couldn't help devouring all those catalogs like you just described. I mean, your brain couldn't help but just start noticing patterns.
Oh yeah. And figuring out, I don't know, one of the things that was so important to me about that music and that time in our life is figuring out how to be a fun party band that also did meaningful music. You know what I mean? And Willie Nelson is the perfect example of that.
He really is.
Like, people go to his shows to like scream and shout and have fun, but when he plays Angel, Flying Too Close to the Ground, or he plays some of his biggest songs, Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, like, people connect with the lyrics in this very deep, meaneful way.
Very private way.
Yeah. And that's, gosh, I don't know how, it's how do you do that? It's like a lifetime pursuit.
It is.
Of trying to find the balance between being the fun, up-tempo band that everyone says they want you to be, and also being the thing that music is supposed to be.
That touches people in the most personal way. Well, but Willie didn't figure out that balance till he was probably in his 40s, mid-40s.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of basic skills you have to learn to get there, and it takes a long time to build up that catalog.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah, and having, like, confidence is such a big part of it. Not when you go to play a quiet song, not getting up there and apologizing for it as you do it. When he does it, he owns it. He's like, well, I can play fast on this song, but I'm about to hit you with like some words that will be equally as interesting. You know what I mean?
Seriously. describe the transition from going from Whiskey Wednesdays to just a few years later being a national touring act. How did that happen for you?
It all happened really fast in a way. So I had released my first solo record, self-released, before we started doing Whiskey Wednesdays. And I was playing, solo shows around town. And that record, I made like 300 vinyl record copies of that album and paid for it myself. And it ended up in Cactus Records in Houston, which is a record store that happens to be connected to New West Records. The owner of New West also has a hand in Cactus, and he got a hold of that vinyl album. And
this is Photographs?
It was the one before Photographs.
Okay.
He got a hold of that vinyl album and reached out to me and was like, hey, I really like this. I would like to talk to you about making another record if you want some help. And at the time, he gave me a little loan.
Okay.
And there was no talk of, New West or anybody signing it. He's just like, I would like to help you make another album.
Awesome.
And that's when we made Photographs. And Photographs is very much a product of that time, too, The A side is like the singer-songwriter stuff that I was doing before Whiskey Wednesdays. And then the B side is very much country, straight country music. And so I made that record and sent it to him. And he liked it, and everyone at the label liked it, and that's when I got signed to New West. So all of this was kind of happening at the same time. I played South by Southwest that year, and I got a booking agent, and I got a European booking agent that same year, and then all of it just kind of snowballed at once, the way it does.
Yep.
It's a funny world. I don't know how many people think about this kind of stuff, but like the pieces all have to fall together in a certain way because everyone is waiting to see who pulls the trigger first.
Yes.
If that makes
well, you're
sense.
talking about people in the business.
Yeah, in the business. Like a booking agent wants to know that you have a record label. A record label wants to know that you go on tour.
Yeah.
So you have to have a booking agent. You know what I mean? And it all has to add up in this perfect world. Otherwise, everyone looks at you in this way, like you're not worth.
You're not made yet. You don't have your ticket to the dance yet.
Exactly.
But getting that first ticket to the dance, and you watch it happen. There's half a dozen bands a year that get that dance card punched, and you can just watch it happen, and you always feel so happy for them because it's a really hard thing to fall together altogether, and there's a lot of luck involved, and once it happens, you got to work pretty hard to screw that up after that.
But and it's, I think about this a lot. I think it's so much luck, and I don't know, think about it this way. If me or you hadn't gotten those lucky breaks when we did, we would still be writing songs. We'd still be playing music.
Yeah.
I think it's arguable, though, that we wouldn't be making the same music.
No.
We'd be making a different kind of music. And I think that all of the things that happened for me, more or less by chance, they put me in these positions that make me sort of rise to the occasion. If that makes sense,
Totally.
like the bigger rooms you start playing, the more you have to really be on it so you can communicate with more people. And I don't know, I think that there is something to be said for, like, my songwriting has benefited by the gradual progression of where I've ended up, the pressure's
knowing that
higher.
there's an audience there waiting for it. We've all felt the feeling of getting a song about 75% finished, calling it good enough, and then taking it in front of a room full of people.
Oh my gosh,
and
yeah.
as soon as you're starting the first bar of the song, you feel naked.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's not going to connect, and there's not a worse feeling than that, really, in the performance realm. So yeah, I mean, once you have that audience there, you really, when you're in the writing room, you just think to yourself, well, I don't want to feel naked when I get out there, so let's take the extra couple hours to get this exactly right.
It's funny if you just say the lyrics to your song in front of any other person. You immediately know which lines are bad. Like, as you're saying it out loud, you hear it through their ears.
Yes, and I don't know what that is.
It's so weird. You can't hear it when you're alone at home.
No.
You don't know what it is, but as soon as you say it to them, it's like, you're like, oh, wow, that's garbage. How did I ever say that in front of anyone? I sound like a moron.
Literally, who do I think I am? You got to ask yourself that a lot. So once that record comes out with New West, you end up moving up to Nashville for a while. What drew you up to Nashville there at that time?
It was purely coincidence. It was.
Okay.
I didn't move there for any musical reasons.
Okay.
And before I moved to Nashville, I moved to San Marcos outside of Austin for like a year.
Oh, really? Okay.
I lived out in the woods on like 3 acres for a year,
Yeah.
and it was beautiful. I loved it. But we had a bunch of friends in Nashville. I was spending a bunch of time there, just playing shows, and a lot of the people I worked with in the music business were there, and really it was just a cheap place to live at the time. And it was, I knew that I was pretty centrally located. All the touring I was doing made sense.
Great place to tour from. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but I lived in Nashville for a year, and in that year I traveled 300 days. So I mean, like, I talk about it in so many interviews. People are like, so tell me about Nashville. Tell me about when we went to Australia or when we go abroad, people are like, tell me about the East Nashville scene, And I'm just like, can we talk about anything else? Please. Like, Nashville is not the reason that I write the songs that I write.
Yeah.
Nashville is insignificant. It is just incidental. And really, anywhere you live, if you work constantly at writing, where you live and what that means in a historical context, it's incidental to what you're doing,
Well, especially, I think that's particularly true now just because I think the real landscape of how your art gets made in the context that it gets made in is certainly not a geographic place, but it is your colleagues and who you're working with and who you're influenced by. And now that we are able to keep in such better virtual touch with everybody, I think it really doesn't matter. You just need to be in a city where when your friend's band goes on tour, they'll come through your town and you can see them once or twice a year,
Yeah, and you can, I mean, on a very basic level, since we were young, we've been able to go on YouTube and, like, look up any music that we want to, you know? And that wasn't true for Ralph Stanley. There's a reason that Ralph Stanley has the specific sound that he has. He was in an isolated mountain town, where the only musicians in town were playing a very similar music to the kind he played, and it was an oral tradition. And I think that there's this nostalgia for that idea that interviewers and music journalists really want. They want to say, like, tell us about Nashville. Tell us about your sound and how Nashville plays into your sound. I'm like, bitch, I got the internet. Like,
I know.
I could look up any song in the world since I was 12 years old.
Totally. No. We are in just a different... We're through the looking glass on that.
Yeah.
For sure. I'd really like to talk to you about being a band leader and being a music director, because there's not a lot of people that we've had on this show, that we're going to have on this show, that write songs but who can also competently lead a band and music direct a tour or an album. And I think you have some pretty unique insights on that. Do you have a guiding philosophy when it comes to putting together a band for a particular tour or an album?
Oh gosh. Well, thank you. First off, I really like. It's a real honor to be thought of as like a music director or like a band leader. That was one of the things that I always really looked up to guys like Ray Price for. And like and in that context of country music, thought about like, well, how do I be that? Or Bob Wills, or like
Bob Wills. Yeah,
how do you organize this cast of characters around you that are all really individual and really strong personalities and all play the music, and play to the song? And how do you create an environment where that's fun? And I don't know, you hear these amazing stories about Bob Wills, where he would like if you were fired, like for instance, if you just weren't pleasing him that week, you weren't playing right, or maybe you did something on the tour bus that bummed him out, you would be waiting to go on tour. You'd be standing outside of your house. There's no phones, there's no way to know, and the bus just wouldn't show up. That's how you knew you were fired.
Oh, Jesus.
they'd say, wait, 7 a.m. tomorrow we're gonna leave, and you'd just be standing out there with your guitar and your sack. The bus just wouldn't
cold shit, man.
But you hear these stories of these like tyrannical overlord band leaders, and that's, I don't know, I was always just thinking like, I want to create an environment. This sucks. Like going on tour sucks for everybody. There's no money in it. It's uncomfortable. Like you're constantly sick and tired, and the least I could do is create a space where everyone feels like this is meaningful and they're having fun.
So how do you do that? What have you learned?
I've still play with the same guys that I started with Whiskey Wednesdays. Except for we got a different drummer, and we played with a handful of drummers, but now we have Tank, who you know.
Oh yeah.
And
the Lion.
A lot of it I was so lucky when we started doing that, because I was playing all these sideman gigs for other people, and through playing guitar with other people, I ended up meeting Joffrey and Kelly and Will and these amazing players who also can be sidemen. And I also think that's an interesting part of how I became a band leader. Like, I'm very used to being a sideman. I know what it's like to have a band leader who is blowing it, who doesn't know what's happening. He's not prepared, and he's in a bad mood. And I never want to, I never would want to put my guys in that situation.
Right.
But I guess what I look for in players and what I really like is I like personality. I think that all the guys that I play with have a really strong personality, and at least in the context of my band and my music, a lot of what I have to do is just stay out of the way of that, and I have to know that they're there for a reason. I really trust them. I really like them. And, there are specific things that I want sometimes, but generally they know what the gig is. And I don't know, it's kind of an ego thing. Like I have to be okay with Kelly playing something really crazy and out and full of personality, and knowing that, that's not, man, we got into this argument the other night when we went to that show. You took me to see His Golden Messenger.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. It was a great show. But I got in a huge argument with the bass player afterwards.
Yeah.
He said to me that he thought Jaco Pastorius overplayed.
And you were triggered.
I got set off because this conversation that we're having now, I mean, I don't think there is such a thing as overplaying when you have a strong, distinct personality. I think that you are just you. You know what I mean? And when you're talking about a musician as developed as Jaco or Kelly Doyle, like, who am I to get in the way of their personality?
Sure.
But that requires a tremendous amount of faith in the person you're playing with.
Well, and it sounds like it requires basically almost 100% of your work, the way that you're describing it, is casting the band.
Yeah.
Is choosing the people.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. I think too, when we talk about arrangements in the studio, or if we're a band for somebody else, I speak in sort of vague, big picture terms, because it's not my job to tell Kelly where to put his fingers on the guitar. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and that's, I think, a big mistake that I see when I do sideman work for other people, or when I do sessions in the studio, is like, you've brought these people here because you think that they're very good at what they do, and you're trying to get a Ferrari to go like 3 miles an hour right now. You're like, what if you did this? I've heard stories of producers that like go to these monster players and like take the guitar out of their hands and like, well, what if you try to play this basic voicing that I know? Because that's what I know. So I don't really do that. I think a lot more in terms of vibe. I'll say to the guys, like, we want this section to be dynamically bigger than the one before, and maybe we want to go really, really, really quiet on the one before. So in contrast, this one is, there's like things that you do as a conductor that are just sort of vague and big picture, and they give everyone a space to live in, but they also give everyone a lot of freedom, because I'm like, it's up to you how you do that, you know?
Right. You're not putting people's fingers on the guitar.
Exactly,
like you said.
yeah.
Is there a specific way, you were saying that as hard as it is to be on the road and do this job, sometimes the reward you feel like you can give people is to make them feel like it's meaningful and fun. Are there, what are some techniques on the road you use to keep a band happy?
I mean, for us, it's all about the music. We have, within my songs, there's huge sections in many of the songs that if there was a score written out, it would just say improvise, you know, and that is a way that every single night playing the same 30 songs gets really boring, you know, but if you can sort of every single night rewrite those songs, and I don't just mean like it's a solo section in a blues song. We do a lot of like straight up free improvisation, you know, like Kelly will just, or Will or Joffrey will just start making noise, and the rest of us will listen and we'll see where that goes, and we'll incorporate that into a tune, you know, and sometimes we'll start a song and then have it descend into brutal noise, and it's
heard it.
Yeah, it's just a way of like making whatever you're doing that day actually be a part of your show. And I think that songwriters do that by telling stories,
right,
and engaging the audience. But there's a musical way to tell stories too, you know, and improvisation is what that is to me. It's just like if you had a weird thing to eat before the show and you're a little tired, like I find it weird and dishonest to go on stage and try to lie about that, right, you know, or try to hide that.
Well, it's just a very different, more presentational style of art that is not very modern, given the movies that we watch now and the TV shows that we watch and the books that we read. You know, that show must go on mentality and, you know, smiling through the pain thing is just a different, it's from a different era.
Yeah.
It could be valid in a different era, but I don't think it's what we find compelling as audience members and musicians today. The ability to carefully curate our own image has always existed, but it's reached a newfound intensity with the images of ourselves that we project online. We post pictures of graduations, sold-out concerts, lavish meals, new tattoos, babies. The only common thread among all of those posts is their images, for better or for worse, that we would like others to see. So when I follow someone online now, I have to do the same thing I do when I'm consuming news. Consider the source. Now more than ever, I really value in-person moments that defy curation. I can learn more about someone by watching them interact with a waiter than I can by scrolling through their last 1,000 posts online. And one of those moments happened last October when Robert and I were touring Australia and New Zealand together. Before the trip, we had been acquaintances but had never really hung out. And one morning, with a bunch of time to kill before the show that night, we took a ferry out to an island called Waiheke, and the story of which you'll hear a little bit more about soon, particularly my prowess on a motorcycle, which was a nightmare. But what I remember most was an interaction between Robert and the clerk at the rental desk. He was from Argentina, the clerk was, and when we told him that we were visiting musicians, he declared that his favorite musician of all time was Astor Piazzolla, an accordion player born in the 1920s who, famous as he may rightly be in many musical circles, would fit my personal definition of obscure. But without missing a beat, Robert began a spirited conversation with this clerk about Piazzolla. It casually demonstrated a detailed knowledge of the accordion player's life and catalog. It was unbelievable. And as he produced his phone to play the bewildered rental clerk a few of Astor Piazzolla's songs that he thought didn't get the recognition that they deserved, I stood there just smiling. In that moment, I learned everything I needed to know about why Robert plays music, and he couldn't have planned that moment if he'd tried. If you have a day set aside to write, describe that day for me, just kind of hour to hour from when you get up to when you go to bed.
Oh, gosh. I'm pretty studious. I think that because of having a background in like guitar, the mechanical side of guitar and practicing, I tend to be pretty regimented. Mm-hmm. And when I have decided that I'm going to be writing, which is not all the time, right. I take a lot of time where I have decidedly I don't want to write.
You're taking some time now.
Yeah, like that. I'm not really writing. I don't want to. I feel like I have to do some living before I want to have stuff to say again.
Right on.
But when I do sit down to write, and I do know that, okay, now I've got some stuff I want to say, I make a schedule, and I treat it like a job. I wake up, and I start journaling, mm-hmm. and I'm pretty focused, and it becomes kind of all-consuming. And that is whether I'm on the road or I'm off the road, There's some really great books that have helped me with that sort of regimented style of writing. Hayes actually turned me onto this book called Bird by Bird.
Yeah.
That was so good.
Yeah.
And, just like showing up at the office is the thing for me. I feel like the inspiration that everyone talks about, like, oh, how are you inspired? I don't have any idea how I'm inspired. I don't know. Yeah. It's like just bolt of lightning when it happens, and I'm so thankful for it. But I do know that if it strikes and I'm not in the office with a pen ready to take it down, mm-hmm. I lose it,
Yes. Or also, you can be in the office, but if you haven't been putting in time, sometimes your muscle for writing and your facility and your ability to catch that lightning is dull. Yep. And when it's dull and when you're not in good shape, if the playoff game comes around and you haven't been running every day and you haven't been shooting, 1,000 threes from the corner every morning, then, you're just not going to be in the place to win the game, or in this case, to get that lightning down.
Yeah, totally.
At what point, how do you bridge the gap between that journaling in the morning and taking it to a musical place? Are you then heading to piano, or are you heading to guitar?
It all just depends. It just depends. For me, there's got to be something in that first thought that is like really interesting for me to finish anything. Yeah. You know what I mean? There's like in that first moment, it's whether it's musical or lyrical, there's something that is like, well, okay, I have to chase that down. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I can spin my wheels on a dumb idea all day if I want to, but for me to really be excited about something, there has to be just some thread. And sometimes that's a lyric, sometimes it's an idea, or just a word, and then sometimes it's like a melody or a chord progression. But a lot of times when it comes from journaling, it'll be me doing an exercise about like in that Bird by Bird book, she gives you a bunch of prompts and different things that you can do. So like one of them is like, I was on tour with Richard Thompson, and I was sitting at this diner in the morning, and I was trying to remember as much as I could about first grade. Mm-hmm. And so I was journaling, and trying to remember names of people, trying to remember kids that I knew, and trying to remember what we did on the weekends. And I just went down this wormhole of like, oh yeah, I remember Skating America, like was this place that we would all go to the skating rink every weekend. And then I started thinking about this one specific girl who I gave flowers to at the skating rink, and I was like, oh, and the couple skate was when we got to hold hands. And like in that moment, after like 3 pages of writing, I was like, boom, there it is, couple skate. That's what this is. This is what I want to write about. I want to write about the time at the skating rink where all the kids get to hold hands and ask each other essentially to dance at this very young age, you know, and then there it is. Like I said, it's like, that's the interesting thing. And then I spend the rest of the day chasing that idea down.
You get that little, whatever that initial nugget is, that seed, and you just start pulling out different strands from it and fleshing it out. That can really become your North Star for a song.
Yeah, it's the beginning though. The first process it's elusive, and I've found I have to just put my mind in weird different places. You know, I have to think about the way my grandfather's house smelled, you know, or I have to think about one bookcase, and I have to try and remember everything that was on the bookcase in my grandfather's house.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? And I try to write down. It's very rare that I sit down in the way that I hear Nashville writers talk about, and I say the name of the song, like I have the title, and then I'm going to write the song based on this title. You know, it's very rare. I tend to have to like push my brain into weird places and then go from there. You know.
I do. You're a very active guy. You walk a lot and you exercise a fair amount. Do you use exercise and walking in your creative process?
Oh yeah.
In what way?
Well, in everything, I feel that the brain can only tolerate so much. At least mine. My brain, like, after a certain amount of time will shut down, whether I'm practicing or writing or doing anything. And I read somewhere in regards to practicing that if you do this, the method that I use now is, like, I set a timer for 5 minutes, and if I'm learning a new passage, I work hard for 5 minutes, and then when the timer goes off, I get up for 5 minutes and I do the dishes, or I go in the yard and like throw a ball around, and then when 5 minutes is up, I go right back to work, and I do that for 3 hours. And for me, at least, like, I absorb so much more.
Yeah.
And I think that writing is the same way. I think that so much of what we do, as much as we would like to take credit for it, our conscious brain is not doing it, you know? Our subconscious is doing the work, and we have to get out of the way and let our subconscious, or, you know, the energy or God or whatever you want to call it, we have to let that thing do the work for us. And then we can go into interviews and take credit for it all day later. But, you know, that's what... So with writing, walking is a part of that, and, you know, running, and just anything that you can do to distract your conscious mind. And
this is why a couple months ago, and you didn't believe me when I told you, but you're starting to come around on it, that I told you that cooking was going to become one of your hobbies. And because it's been a real big hobby for me for the last 5 years. And I realized one of the reasons that I like it is for that reason that you just described right there. I work for a little bit on a song. And then when I hit an impasse, I walk into the kitchen and I do one part of my preparation.
Yeah.
And then I walk back and work again. And it's a very nice place to do those mental respites. And then when you're done, you've, you know, cooked dinner for your wife, and you don't feel like a complete waste of human existence.
What did you tell me the other day, though, about your friend said about cooking?
This all credit goes to my good friend Alex Field, who once said, "Cooking serves both my need for control and my need for praise." And that's probably closer to the mark of why I do it.
I love it.
Yeah,
we've been grilling every night.
Up at your place?
Yeah, every single night.
What have you been grilling?
I've been grilling a lot of salmon, and I made fajitas the other night. And
the HEB has a lot of the pre-marinated meat.
Yeah,
it's very good.
It's very nice. Well, HEB is a good place all around. I went to HEB yesterday. Was it yesterday or the day before? Yeah. And I ran into Joe at HEB. Robert and his lady, a little worse for the wear, rolled into the HEB cafe. HEB, for people who don't live in Texas, is the greatest grocery store. And I've been to all lower 48 states.
It is the greatest grocery store in America. There is not. Harris Teeter comes in a very far second. Before we finish the interview today, I think I'd like to wrap up kind of where we started, and you can kind of describe to people my prowess at riding a motorcycle.
Okay. Well, me and Joe met because we were going to go on tour in Australia together. And that Australian tour started in New Zealand. We played one show in Auckland, and then we flew over to Australia. And we had a day off in Auckland. And I've been to New Zealand a bunch, and this venue we're playing in Auckland is walking distance from this ferry that takes you over to this island called Wahiki.
Yeah.
And it's where they make a bunch of wine. And it's this beautiful little island that has very few cars on it. And so when you get there on the ferry, which is half an hour, 45 minutes, you have to rent usually a motorcycle is what I've done in the past.
And you suggested this to me. I've never ridden a motorcycle before, and you were like, look, we're going to take a ferry, me and you, and then we're going to rent motorcycles. And for some reason, I was just like, yeah, it's great. Of course I can ride a motorcycle.
Oh man, we got on the motorcycles, and I took it for granted. I thought, like, Joe's been so comfortable all day. Of course he's done this before. And man, I've never seen anything like it. The guy in charge handed you the keys, and you sat down and just gave it all the gas immediately.
And all the brake.
And just skidded out of control directly out of family. This family was trying to rent a car, and it was like two little kids and a mom, and you were just careening so fast
about
right at
40
them.
miles per hour.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And me and the guy who ran the motorcycle rental place were looking at each other like, what? Like, he looked at me like he doesn't know how to ride a motorcycle. And I'm like, I just met him.
I just met this motherfucker. Oh man, that was one of the, and then I was able to avoid the family and just somehow bring the bike to a stop. And then the guy that was renting them to us just came over and just took the keys from me.
Yeah.
And that was...
you lost your privileges.
Lost my privileges. Dude, thank you for taking time out today and coming over and rapping with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, have fun editing this. I know we just said a bunch of crazy stuff.
This one doesn't need any editing at all, brother. That is our show for this month, so thank you for listening. Robert's latest album is self-titled. It's fantastic, and it's available everywhere digital music is sold or streamed. Today's episode was mixed by Matt Schuessler. Research and editorial direction provided by the intrepid and thorough Paul Barbagallo. If before we meet again, you sit down to write, please remember, a compelling Instagram account is not a song. An expensive drug habit is not a song. And most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself. And for you, just keep your eye on the song.